And I'm your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You are listening to How to Handle Rejection. When we're thinking about how to handle rejection, we can go to a lot of ways. We can go outside of ourselves. How do I handle rejection from others if I was somebody else? How do I give rejection so that somebody else doesn't feel rejected? It's very rare that we can actually turn that and look at ourselves because it creates, it's a soft spot. It's a spot that we don't necessarily want to face. It challenges our own acceptance in our tribe, whatever that may be, our place in our family, our place in our neighborhood, our place in our community, our place in our world. When we have our own insecurities that we're working with and we're always putting it outside of ourselves, it makes me think about the fact that we're doing ourselves a disservice. And that's why I wanted to talk about how to handle rejection today. And Ryan and Shane and Federico really share some good insights, some questions, and some practical things that we can do in the moment, recognizing that we're just human and we're going to be the way that we're going to be, knowing that whether we're consciously or unconsciously doing things in alignment with who we are, it's going to happen. And we can second guess ourselves. And we also don't have to second guess ourselves. And it's in that personal awareness that we're really going to explore so that we can understand rejection as a part of life and understand how we want to incorporate it so we know how to move forward with the strength and the confidence that we need to do what we are here to do, to handle the obligations that we have accepted, to own the choices that we have made and the outcomes that come with that. In this conversation, you're going to hear things like rejection is a way of life. It shows up everywhere. And where we are in our own mind and our own mindset is going to influence our reaction and our response. And there's always two sides to this story. We're supported or we're challenged, as one example. We talk about this concept of but. I really like what you did, but. Or this is a great concept, but. And we're going to talk about that a lot. It's really important in the sense that we're looking for ways to grow, and are we actually helping people when we say that to them? And are we really helped when people say that to us? We're going to hear some stories. We're going to understand that at the core of all of this is our values, and the way that we act dictate our values more than our beliefs dictate our values. So enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Our panel today includes Shane Sturgeon, Dr. Federico Fioretto, and Dr. Ryan Marchman. Shane has been a successful manager for 22 years, and he's retired since 2016, and he's working to launch his own startup that is focused on developing tools and resources to support managers and project managers in their roles. During his management career, Shane has led and managed both operational and cross-functional project teams in the fields of information technology, financial services and systems, human resources, and business transformation. He also coaches and mentors other managers. He has degrees in physics, electronics, and accounting. He's also undertaking graduate studies in leadership, management, and governance. He is currently combining all of this knowledge, this life experience, with his passion for software to create financial modeling applications designed for managers that want to focus their time on other things besides spreadsheets. Dr. Federico Fioretto is an entrepreneur, trainer, and coach. He is passionate about sustainability and the development of human potential. He believes in the possibility to transform all conflicts and provide a method toward open communication, because it's through communication that we can build connection and collaborate more fully together. Dr. Ryan Marchman is a teacher, a healer, and a philosopher in Boulder, Colorado. He is the founder of Adjustatorium, a vitalistic chiropractic practice. He travels to speak and teaches on the subjects of health, human behavior and potential, and chiropractic mastery. When I was putting this panel together, I like to talk about things that other people don't like to talk about. I like to talk about things that are seemingly hard and that we tend to avoid, when in reality, when we just show up and we face it and we actually look at it, it's not as big and bad and scary as we originally thought it was. And that's where rejection is something we all handle. It's how we look at the world and our reaction to it. And so I posed this question, and I'm excited to hear your answers. What does rejection mean to you, and how do you respond to it? Hey, Shane, how about if you start us off?
That's really what my initial reaction was as well when you asked me to think about this. My first thought was, well, how am I going to talk about that? It's not something I'm actually familiar with. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I realized I experience rejection almost daily. It's just one of those things that just occurs. I'll make a suggestion to one of my staff about an approach, and they'll ignore me. I suggest something to my wife and she ignores me. I point out potential risks in a plan to stakeholders and they ignore me. And then there's the other one when you're applying for jobs and you're just getting rejected left, right and center. It's because it's just part of life. It's like change and breathing, really. Rejection's inevitable. And that's why I think that I just sort of tend to take it in my stride. And the way I handle it, there's two ways. The first one is when something's not important to me, I shrug it off and just move on. For things that are important, then I'll actually do quite a lot of prep up front to try and make sure that rejection isn't something that actually occurs. And so I'll do a lot of stakeholder analysis to make sure that I anticipate objections and then I'm ready to handle those ahead of time, so that actually increases my chances of actually being successful rather than experiencing rejection. And I generally succeed, but in situations where I don't, then I just treat it like any other failure. I try to learn from it. So I try to understand why something was rejected. Did I miss a key piece of analysis that I should have? And is there something that I can sort of learn from the stakeholders' reaction? Were they surprised? Did I need to do more up front to try and make sure that I brought them along with me? Sometimes it's just a case of imperfect information, and we talked about this last time you and I talked. Your superiors have something that you don't, and hence you can't take it forward into your idea. And if that's the case, then I generally try to see if I can get them to not reject the idea outright, but give me an opportunity to come back incorporating that if it's still a valid idea. And sometimes the idea has real merit. It's just not as important as something else. And so it falls down the priority list. And so all of these are reasons that I don't take rejection personally. It's just, as I said earlier, it's just a fact of life, really. A job probably is something a little bit different. When you're looking for a job, maybe you're actually trying to learn something from that process to increase your chances for the next time. And I've had quite a lot of experience in that. I got rejected for lots of jobs, but it was always because I was trying to change careers, and that's a really tricky one. So you need to go into that knowing that rejection is going to be a key part of that, and knowing that it's just a step towards that outcome. So anyhow, those are my sort of thoughts. Hopefully I haven't gone over my 2 minutes.
All right, Federico, what do you think? How would you answer that question?
Well, I agree with Shane that rejection happens. It's part of life. It depends a lot on the state of mind in which I am. If I'm in a state of need, if I'm kind of pure, or if I'm charging emotionally what I'm looking for, what I'm trying to offer to propose to someone, and I get rejected, that really gets me off balance, and it can become, well, tragic in a way, so to exaggerate a bit the words. Essentially, I'm offering my counterpart or my partner an opportunity to share something, to make the most of my experience, skills, or whatever kind of offer I'm doing. My reaction is really very much, okay, it's just too bad that we didn't make the most of this opportunity. That influences, that state of mind has a great influence of how I do respond and how positive I can respond to that. And another thing, another consideration I would like to do is, depends. When I'm rejected, I try, first of all, to look within myself to see, first of all, if I've been in the right state of mind, because I'm sure that if I'm offering with the idea that I'm giving you an opportunity, first of all, I'm more successful. Certainly, I'm more effective. So I try to look into myself to see if I've been in the right state of mind and if I've been offering the best that I could so as not to be rejected once again. If I've answered yes, I've done my best, I was not in a request, I was really trying to share an opportunity with someone, then I can very easily let go and say, okay, let's just go to the next opportunity and try to share what I can with someone else. That's as a starter.
I think that is a fantastic starter. Thank you, Federico. All right, Ryan, how would you answer the question?
Here's my truth about rejection. I can approach it from several ways, but I'm going to start by saying there's a biological imperative built into our brains for acceptance from our peers. Because if you think about human beings in ancient times, being accepted by the tribe was survival, and being exiled by the tribe was almost certain death. Mm-hmm. As long as we feel like there's something at stake, our survival is at stake, we have emotional investment in whatever it is that we're pursuing, the fear of rejection is going to be there, and it's going to be very strong. But if you look back on your life personally, you'll find that even among friends and family, there have always been people who like you or dislike you. There have always been people who support you or challenge you. There have always been people who accept you or reject you. Just like the other two fellows said, that's just part of life. And it's an imbalanced perspective to believe that you can have acceptance without rejection, or pleasure without pain, or good without bad. So the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask. So when it comes to rejection, I want to ask you, what quality of questions are you asking around rejection? If you look closely, you'll find that every time you've ever been rejected, there's been a hidden benefit. And every time you've ever rejected somebody else, there's been a benefit to that person. So the questions you can start to ask to unravel this rejection for yourself and break the addiction to acceptance are, when this happened to me, what was the benefit? What did I get from this situation? How did it help me move forward with my life? Did it help me become a stronger person and stand up for what I believe? Did it help me reflect on myself and find out if I was wrong? Another question you can ask is, when I've done that to somebody else, what's been the hidden benefit to them? How has my rejecting somebody else been a benefit to them? For example, if somebody came to me with a business proposal and I rejected it, it's a benefit to them because I don't waste their time or money on me as a client, right? So there are lots of hidden benefits to rejection, just like there are just as many benefits and drawbacks to acceptance as there are to rejection. If you imagine if somebody accepted you every time, no matter what you did, you would become juvenilely dependent on that person. You wouldn't grow, right? So growth happens between rejection and acceptance, between pain and pleasure, between good and bad, support and challenge. To get the most out of rejection, break the addiction, the dopamine cycle to acceptance, take away the emotional charge from acceptance and rejection by finding out both sides of everything.
And we just jumped in full feet, deep end, boom. We could stop here, and we are not. We are going to continue to go forward because we're talking about rejection, and we have 3 great answers that talk about a personal story and the things that come up, how we might incorporate and look at how we handle rejection ourselves. And I want to first take those answers and actually ask you guys, what does rejection mean to you? Let's just actually define it. What does rejection mean to you, Shane?
At its core, probably having somebody disagree with my assessment of something, whether it's an idea or a proposal. And what they're really saying is, sure, you've done that work, but, we're not going to do anything with it because either I don't agree with it, you're wrong, or there's some other factor. It's an emotional thing, although I don't get emotional, but I certainly see where Ryan's coming from, and I'd agree with, if you aren't hard about it, you could sort of take all that, internalize, and think they're rejecting me, the person. But it's not about rejection of me, the person. It's about rejection of the idea or the concept or something like that.
What would you add to that, Federico?
There is a big difference when you get rejected, whether you take it as a rejection of you as a person, meaning that you feel like you have been rejected by your tribe, recalling Ryan, or by your peers, by the community upon which your survival in the biological sense depends, or your emotional well-being if you are dependent on the approval and the acceptance of your community, or if you are taking it as a rejection or a disagreement on something, as Shane said, that you have made a proposal, you have come up with an idea, and others don't think that that's a priority, so they don't want to go down that line for that moment. I think it depends very much on the state of mind and our moment in life, how we are emotionally, how we are with relationship to our basic needs. That's something that I use in my approach. There's a say, I don't know how it translates into English, but in Italian we say that if a door closes, there's a portal opening somewhere. So a rejection is anyway an opportunity to go through a larger door into something more interesting, or anyway to progress into life, because I think that everybody here and everybody who is in the audience probably will have grown through rejections and acceptances.
What would you add, Ryan?
I agree, actually, with Federico. A lot of what he said and what Shane said, it's about your state of mind. And whether you take a rejection as simply being told no, or as you take it as a personal rejection that means something about you. And it has to do with this: fear of losing the person who you're being rejected by, or fear of losing the business that you desperately need. Or when there's a fear of loss of something, then the fear of rejection comes up. But if you just meet some guy on the street, you never met him before, you don't care about him, you don't really care what his opinion of you is. You only fear rejection from those who you've put on a pedestal for some reason, either, as Federico said, from your emotional well-being, or because you need this client desperately for your business, or perhaps you admire them or you infatuate with them. And at that point, it becomes more than a no, and it becomes a personal rejection. That's where the pain comes in, because you're expecting more pleasure than pain here. You're expecting to be accepted, so your rejection, which you perceive will be painful, is it's mainly about where you are in your mind in relation to the person who is rejecting you, as to whether or not you feel that would be a rejection or it'll be just being told no.
One of the things I heard you all say, and one of you actually said it, was the word but. Blah, 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 but blah, blah, blah. Anybody who's taking a public speaking course or more of nonviolent communication or anything for negotiation, buts stop conversation. They really negate everything that was said. So you're saying something, and then you're saying, but I lied. And I really mean this instead. And we use it as this sandwich technique for rejection or positive criticism. And I'm going to ask each of you for a personal story of something where you went, and I'm going to use Ryan's phrase, the between where the growth happens. I want you each to think of a story that you can share. I'm going to share a very recent story for me. It's important because the more we talk about these things, the more we have a better idea of what the definition is that we're working with, means that we can better empathize with other people without condescendingly sympathize or putting them down not knowingly. Because that's one of the things I also think when it comes to acceptance of being part of is when we're experiencing this and somebody else witnesses it, what is their reaction to us? I am on a nonprofit board. Those of you who have ever worked on nonprofit boards, they're amazing and wonderful, and they're full of need, and they'll take anybody that walks off the street with extra time. And I think that's good because it's how stuff gets done. It's people with this passion, and they come together. When people come together, they have different definitions of how things are. They have different expectations of what happens. They have decided what their reality around this common project is. And so for somebody else to come in, and I was the new person, when I came into this organization of this set ways, I saw this amazing thing, and I immediately saw potential, and I saw opportunity, and I listened to their goals, and I brought ideas. And every single idea I had was met and stopped. Every single one. Okay, 9 months now, every single one. My determination kicked in because I'm like, I see it. You guys are telling me what you want. We're saying all the same things, and I'm not trying to change the world. I want all of the other stuff that's going on to work too. I'm just going to bring in this one little piece. I'm going to add more Jessica and bring my skills to help get this done because we're all trying to work together. Not only did it just get stopped, then other stuff came up. Now there were going to be actual physical barriers in conversations that actually stopped any progress around anything. So not only did my ideas get stopped, all of the other great ideas that existed before I got there began to suffer. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Reading between the lines and feeling out the way things are. And I really think there's a sense of fear there. There's a sense of fear that I'm going to disrupt the norm. And I've stirred the pot enough that people are unsure. And at the same point in time, when those people got unsure, any opportunity for me to fully connect with them, to build a relationship and actually work with them, continued to decline. It's like at the end of a gold mine. There's way more energy going in to the gold mine than the actual gold coming out on the other side. And I know that I'm not alone in this. And I know a lot of people on nonprofit boards experience this.
I think that's common experience, Jessica. I mean, I've had the same experience in nonprofits. Unlike you, in most of those cases, if I think about it, of ultimately elected to move on. I think nonprofits sort of suffer from the idea that a lot of people there that don't have a lot of effort or energy to put into it, they're on a board and they feel as though an idea comes along, it's just going to create more work for them possibly. And so that's part of where they're coming from. It's this pain element that Ryan was talking about. And the other thing is that I make a comment, and true in business as well, in my experience, sometimes you just simply don't know what the other I'll call them hidden agendas. It sounds sort of nefarious, but it's not necessarily that way. It's just that everyone's different. They've got their own perspective on things. They've got their own things they want to achieve in their lives or in their jobs, in their careers. And it just so happens that something that you're put forward just doesn't gel with that. And sometimes they'll be upfront about it. And I've found that through stakeholder analysis. When you go out and talk to stakeholders ahead of time, they'll be upfront about what their issues are. And you can then try and address those when it comes time to try and push something forward. And sometimes they'll tell you something to your face in a one-on-one, and then they'll hang you out to dry in a meeting. And that's just the way it is. I'm finding this a bit difficult, to be honest, because I don't generally react to the stuff emotionally. And when you talk about learning experiences, I learn from everything. And so nothing really sort of stands out.
If you're bridging the gap between my nonprofit example and what actually happens in businesses, and I think that we should make sure that that's known. Nonprofits are not alone in this. This happens in organizations where a leader is hired in and they now have this team that they have to figure out how to work. They're the ultimate accountability person too. Or new owners of a company, when there's a purchase and a sale, and then you're inheriting all of this stuff, or you've purchased all of this stuff, including the people that are doing the different jobs in the organization. And I think the same things apply. And I love that you've said you learn from everything. So if you had one tip about learning from everything, is there something that you could do a little self-reflection and say, here's the question I ask?
The first question I actually ask myself is, what did I do wrong? And I don't want your listeners, this is all about internalizing and saying, oh, woe is me or anything like that, because I certainly don't look at it that way. It's not, hey, I really screwed up, I'm a really bad person. It's, what was it that I could have done better to have got the better outcome? Was there anything I could have done better, given the circumstances and the information that was known to me? And if there was something like that, what am I going to do to make sure that next time I have a better shot at success? So even though the answer is negative in a way and that it's looking internally and trying to internalize this rejection, it isn't about that. It's really about saying, okay, this is the first place to look, because my behavior and what I do, that's the only thing I can really change. I can't change how those other people reacted to the idea unless I first look internally and figure out what it is that I need to learn from them in order to be able to present it in a different way, enables them to then think about their behavior or their reaction to it.
Ryan or Federico?
I completely agree, and I want to expand upon that, because it does start with looking within first. One of the important things you need to find when you look inside and you're kind of examining the dynamics between you and other people, whether it's in a business meeting or it's a nonprofit or people out in the public, you have to determine your values. When you ask people what their values are, they say, I value church, or I value my family, or I value honesty. And those are social idealisms. That's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about values, I mean, what is important to you that is demonstrated daily in your life? What do you spend your time doing? What do you spend your energy on? What do you spend your money doing? Those are the things that are really valuable to you in your life. And when you're really clear on what your values are, you can take a stand or take action in the direction that supports your values. And then you can start to understand the other people's values in that situation. And when you understand the other people's values and can communicate what you need in their values, in terms of their values, it changes from a situation of challenge to a situation of support. Because if they can see that what you're offering them supports their values, what they're going for, then they will get behind you. If you're communicating in such a way that it says, this is what I want, this is what I see for you guys, do it, none of them are going to cooperate, because in their mind, that's not connected to what they really want in life.
So that makes me think of change. I want to come back to that after we hear from Federico.
I would make a difference between nonprofits and businesses. There is not such a big difference, but there is one, and I've been working in both environments. In nonprofits, I have seen something which is kind of an allergy to competence. Having a big heart was everything that's needed, and people didn't have to learn the trade or getting some kind of competence. So there is a lot of people who work in nonprofits. I work all over the world, but mostly I'm based in Italy, and my nonprofit activity is mostly here. So maybe there is a cultural bias, I don't know. But there is this idea that we want to change the world, and we do it just with our beautiful heart. This is not the way it works. You need some competence in order to achieve results, because in the world that we want to change, there's a lot of competence to make the world as it is that we want to change. So maybe a person like you or like me, I think we are somehow alike in many aspects, gets into a non-profit board. You get there with your creativity, enthusiasm, plenty of ideas, problem-solving capacities, We are very much focused on objectives, achieving, and that very much scares the hell out of them. That creates a big reaction, and that may result into a rejection that can cause that panic effect that you were talking about. Everything gets stopped because there is someone who is going to upset the status quo completely. What is this person trying to do here? And there is a lot of ego clashes, people who feel their positions are threatened because everyone has an ego, except for enlightened people, but I don't know any. This so far, maybe I will, maybe. In the business sector, we are still human beings, so we have more or less the same ways of working, but there is somehow more attention to competence. But I will share my experience, not a specific one, because unfortunately, I've had many repetitive experiences of rejection in my years as a consultant and inspirer. Because very often it happened to me that I got truckload of congratulations for the qualities, the extraordinary ideas that I had, the project that I had assembled, but thank you, we don't do that. And that made me crazy. If they had told me, oh, that's crap, we don't want that, it would have been more acceptable. And that was a very important learning. So I agree absolutely with my colleagues here that we learn through experiences, and rejection is an experience, that I was scaring my prospects away. I had a vision. I'm a visionary. I can see 50 years from now, but not everybody. And maybe I could see the good for my prospect in 50 years, but the person was taken by his or her daily life, daily routines, and he was able just to see 3 months ahead. So by talking what will be in 50 years, they would be scared away. And I learned that I should graduate the way into which I shared my vision, keep maybe the vision in 50 years for me, and take the person by hand to the next 3 months. And that for me was a big learning, and my capacity to serve my clients has improved very much because now I'm effective. And for years, I've been having wonderful visions, but they were useful for nobody.
People have a really hard time seeing long-term visions. You need to give them much shorter milestones, and that then brings them along for the ride. They can see progress. I'm a bit like you, but most of us aren't. I think I learnt that too.
Okay, so we're going to go back to this concept of change and resistance. It's also going to mold into this idea of a space to make mistakes. What was just being talked about with long-term versus short-term, and this idea of shared meaning. We're trying to build this shared meaning, and if we have a space for mistakes to occur, we're all seeing each other's progress, and we continue to build a shared meaning through experience together of how do we best work to continue to go forward, whether that's in our families, whether that's in our volunteer work, whether that's at work, whether that's wherever. Sometimes we aren't clear with ourselves, or we aren't honest with ourselves, and we're doing something because we think we should. The shoulda, woulda, couldas come in, or somebody tells us we're really good at it, and while we don't like it, we always find ourselves doing that thing that we're really good at, and there's no fulfillment there, meaning we get tired, it's draining, we don't have any energy, and then what happens? We get grouchy, and we're not very fun to be around, and it makes us a little more antisocial and hard to get along with. Then when that kind of stuff starts to happen, whatever the scale, whatever the speed, based off of different situations, at some point there's this, I'm going to draw a line in the sand. And when I draw that line in the sand, now there's a vacuum. It's like lightning. We get thunder because the lightning comes through and creates this space, and the air has to fill the space, and it makes a sound. And if we say, no more, I'm done with this, right? Then what happens? The whole rest of the world has to scramble to fill in the space of that person isn't there. Our world is all kind of crazy. It's all chaotic right now. People will try and pull us back to where we were across that line we've just drawn, across that place we've said no more. That's really not who we are. Other people can feel rejected from that. And that's a scary thing too, because they're going around saying, oh, this is our world, this is our world. And I know Jessica and Federico and Ryan and Shane, and all of a sudden one of them goes, nope, not anymore. I'm going to be this now, or I'm going to stop that, or I'm now clear about this. I disrupt everybody else's world around me. Are you guys following that a little?
A little bit.
Okay.
I think a lot of that comes down to values. That was what Ryan was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay, keep going.
Well, I was going to kick over to Ryan because Ryan's obviously the expert on that. But I didn't want to hog his thunder. But what you were talking about to me struck me as being something was inconsistent with your values in your example. And that's where I got to in some of my nonprofit board experiences as well. That's where you do draw that line. You simply say, well, my values are such that my energy spent on this thing here is not consistent with where my values are, and I'm better to just part ways and let them go. If I think about that example, they did try to pull me back, and I just said, no, not going to happen.
I've had many experiences like that where I've examined my values. I've made a drastic change in my life. I've had a couple different careers. And then whoever you leave behind, whatever void that you left to be filled is often very threatening for people. And it disrupts people's status quo, and they want to fill that void again with something that's familiar. It's simply impossible, because even if you go back to that situation, you're not the same person you were when you filled the situation originally. So it's not going to be fulfilling for you, and ultimately won't be fulfilling for them anyway, because regardless of whether you're aware of your highest values or not, you are going to make decisions that are supportive of your values. Consciously or unconsciously, it'll happen. And it's the same thing with the other people as well. And your voids, just like you talked about the void that you leave behind when you leave a situation, voids create values. So whatever you perceive as missing in the world and your life, that's what becomes important to you to fulfill. A couple of years ago, I had a long career as a martial artist, and I was a teacher, and I taught seminars and traveled. And I left the career because it was no longer congruent with my highest values, and I still have people emailing me asking me to come back, and it's like they are uncomfortable with the fact that I gave up what they love, and they take it as a rejection of their value because it's still something that they love. It's no longer something that I love, right? And so people addicted to acceptance, they want that validation from you that puts their status quo back in place. However, it's an imbalanced perspective. They're expecting more pleasure than pain, or more pain from your leaving than they'll gain from pleasure. And that's when you go back through those questions. What are the hidden benefits? What are the hidden costs? Every situation removes the emotional charge. It feels balanced again.
If you had heeded to those people emailing you, asking you to give more martial arts training, what quality of training would you have delivered, since you were out of that life? You had progressed forward. So to me, it's very much that we should learn to do just what we really love to do, what is a passion for us. And that's the best quality that we can deliver everywhere. And remember that none of us is God. I'm not talking religion here, but it's just a way to say that. So everybody can be replaced. And if we live a situation where we don't feel passion anymore, we are not adding value there. It's best that we go away. We live for what gives more stimulus to us. And then we leave space. And that's probably what Ryan meant, saying that void creates value. Because if I take away my poor contribution in a place where I don't feel I belong anymore, there is room for someone else to step into, or maybe people who were there with me will grow and fill that space by themselves. When I am consistent with again, I use basic needs more than values, but I think we are more or less telling the same thing. If I'm consistent with myself, it's not selfishness. It's the best contribution that I can bring.
And the point I'd make is when you move on, often people don't even remember you anyway. That sort of shows you, puts, I guess, your contribution into some perspective. And I've had a recent experience of that. It's a bit humbling, really.
This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and you are listening to How to Handle Rejection. I'm really enjoying this part of the conversation. It is very vulnerable to think about, and it's a very vulnerable place to sit and evaluate. And when we're looking back and we're asking ourselves questions and we're looking internally, one of the things that I heard each of you say was one of the best things that we can do is just be us. And I'm curious how you guys would add or change this in the sense that rejection isn't a bad thing. We've all agreed that that's the case. There's something there for us to learn from, to benefit from, to move into. And what is that hidden benefit? Whether we're giving the rejection or we're receiving the rejection. What if we all lived as an adult the way we did when we were 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, where I know what I want, I will say yes, I will say no. When I'm given a choice, I will make my choice. And then, of course, it's up to the people who are molding me and supporting me and surrounding me to hold me to those choices and the outcomes of those choices. But very clear, Yes, I want a cookie. No, I don't want dinner. Yes, I want to go play. I did say I was going to clean my room, so I'm going to go clean my room. I don't like that anymore, but I like this now. And we just know that, and we move on. Somewhere along the line, this concept of socialization made us timid about that. And I really want to stay there for a minute, because you each were talking a little bit about being courageous and standing with your values. And when we second guess ourselves, I think we're going against our higher, what's guiding us higher than ourselves, whether we know it or not. And I'm curious your take on that. And do you guys live that way? Are you able to move through and not second guess yourself along the way?
I'll be the first to say that I absolutely do not live that way 100% of the time. You know, there are always times when I'm not living at 100% of my highest values, when I don't second guess myself. Sometimes I do second guess myself. I think it's part of human nature, but it still just comes down to the questions you're asking yourself. And I think you brought up a really good point, and that is, we inject the social ideals of other people as we grow. It becomes from our teachers, our mothers and fathers, our preachers, MFTPs. I don't know if you've heard that term. And it starts to interfere with our expression of what we really want. And that's why it's really important to do the self-work and discovering and separating, is this something that's truly valuable to me, or is this something that was valuable to someone else and that relationship was valuable to me, so I injected that value into my life?
I'm not sure that rejection is a bad thing in itself. We can see it in different ways, because rejection, it can be saying no to something and saying yes to something else. So it's a choice. And we have something that you mention, which is a strong cultural conditioning. In peace studies, we call this structural violence. We are educated in not listening to ourselves, not following our feelings, not living in the way that you were describing, Jesse. The fact that when we were very young kids, we were straight. Yes, I want. No, I don't want. And then we were educated in thinking that, well, saying no to the old lady is not really polite, so you'd better say yes, even if you would very much scream, no, absolutely, no way. So that's the cultural conditioning, and that's what brings us to the point where Ryan was very honestly saying that we cannot live that way, even if we are engaged in working on ourselves, on our awareness, 100% of the time. Just to share a personal experience, recently, I was invited to bid for, I think, the biggest client that I could get in the last years. And at the point I decided that since I liked what they do, that I would give my feedback to them after the first meeting in a really heartfelt way, with absolutely no bias, in order to deliver something that would be liked by them as a bid. I just wanted to help them unconditionally. And I gave feedback from my heart, and you know what? I got the contract. And I didn't even put a price on my bid. I just said from my heart what I felt in that moment. So I think that if we learn again to be like those babies that we were long ago, for me, I think we can even have some advantages in our social world today, because in the end, at the bottom, we are human beings, and we know how to discern something which is truthful, which is the baby saying yes or no, from something which is polite, but I know it's not the truth, and in the long term, it would not be for my good.
And this is going to bring us to the last piece of our conversation, going with this concept that it is bold to reject. Why is it bold in a leader role today? And how do you reject honestly from your heart?
I think it's bold because rejection is saying, and in business anyway, it's saying that's something we're not going to do. That is a key part of strategy, really. Strategy is not just about what you are going to do, but it's more about what you're not going to do. And so by saying and rejecting something, you're actually saying, this is not aligned with where we want to go. It's not aligned with our strategy. And I think that's bold. It's often too easy just to say, oh, well, yeah, okay, it's okay. It's an okay idea. We'll just go ahead and do it. I think it's much harder to actually be definitive and say, we're not going to do that. How do you do it? Well, I think it depends on the situation. And if I think about personally when I've rejected ideas and people, there are some situations where you just actually want the person to go away and shut down, in which case that's not the norm for me. But those are the cases where you just basically don't give any feedback at all, and you make it very clear this is the end of it. But in other cases, I come back to what I said last time we spoke, which is about a leader's role to nurture their staff. And I'll generally take the person through my thought process. And it's not just about rejecting at that point, in my mind anyway. It's about explaining to them why I've come to the decision that I did, that I don't think it's a good idea. But it's about also giving them some insight into that process so that they can actually come back and challenge my thinking. Because maybe I was wrong. Perhaps once they understand where my thinking was, they might say, oh, actually, there was a bit that I failed to tell you, Shane, and it's a really key bit. And I say, oh, excellent, now you've said that. This changes everything. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's go ahead with it. But if that's not the case, then they've learned something for when they're growing. So it's about that growth thing for them. They've now learned, okay, well, here's something that I didn't consider that Shane did. And so I'm going to make sure that next time when I bring something forward, I learn from that. And they can't do that unless you provide them with that context and some insight as to how you came to that decision.
Okay, Federico.
I think, first of all, we should discern what we are rejecting. I don't think very much how I should reject a phone call from the upteenth direct marketing company that's calling me on the phone at 10 in the evening. So that's very much a straight rejection. But apart from this, how honest, how engaging, how deep is the proposal that I have received? And I think that I should match at least with the same honesty, transparency, and engagement. Because if a person has worked on something in my interest to propose me something seriously, I should dedicate my time in order to, as Shane was saying, taking them through my thought process, and remembering that the world is a very small place. Sooner or later, we all meet again. It's much better to reject graciously in a way that leaves good relationships. And that very often happens when we remember, when we keep in mind that we reject a proposal or reject a way down which to go, as Shane was saying. We reject a strategic direction, but we don't reject the person or the team who has formulated the proposal. Is it bold or not? Is it not a duty for a leader to reject strategies or proposals or business ideas that his or her company shouldn't pursue because they are not good in the interest of all of the stakeholders of the business? It's not really bold. It's part of your business. And it's also not only in business, it's also part of our duty as parents to say no sometimes to our children. Whereas, as Shane was suggesting, it's sometimes much easier to say, okay, all right, let's just go on with that. No, it's much more difficult to say no when the baby wants a yes, and then you have to explain why no. It's more a duty than something bold, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Federico. Ryan?
I really love the way he put that, because as a chiropractor, it's my duty to give my patients a course of action that is in their best interest 100% of the time. And sometimes they want to propose a different course of action. As somebody's doctor, it's my duty to reject whichever course of action is not within their best interest. So I'm rejecting people on a daily basis, and I'm receiving rejections on a daily basis because we're talking about people's health. And it would be really easy to take that personally in two ways. I could take my rejection personally when someone doesn't want the care that I give, as if maybe I'm not doing a good job or whatever. Or I could take personally that I don't want to hurt their feelings. If I reject this person, then they're going to think I'm not as nice, and then they won't come back. Or if I reject this person, they're going to think their ideas are worthless or whatever. So not that I do take it personally, but it's easy to do that way. In order to avoid that kind of trap of falling into not being bold and avoiding rejecting people, you have to keep your vision forefront in your mind. Like Federico and Shane were talking about, I'm also a visionary, and I cast a vision for people that goes on many years. Often that's too much for people all at once, but if I keep that vision in my own mind, then when I tell people what they need, if I know what they need, and I know that I know that I know that I know what they need, it makes it impossible for me to say anything other than that. It becomes a duty to reject that person's proposal if it's not for their highest good.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Bold Business, How to Handle Rejection today. You can find all the program notes at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P50. That is thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P like program 50. Or search How to Handle Rejection. Make sure when you listen to this, you stop and you subscribe to the Voice of Bold Business Radio on your favorite listening platform. We will get more programs out every Tuesday and Friday so that you have more information to keep yourself going and inspired and learn as an active leader today. And as a leader, you're defining what it means. You're defining what a leader is in today's world, in business, in life, in the world. And your stories and experiences add to that definition. I want you to take a minute, now that you've listened to this, and tell us, respond, how do you handle rejection?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.